Good. Nice to meet you.
Oh, mate, the pleasure is all mine. I've just sat down and watched your film over the last couple of days, and I've got to say it is an absolutely amazing film, so congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much. That's very nice to hear.
Now, I know that the original idea from the film came from your short film, but where did that idea come from? Because I've talked about this film to friends of mine with autistic children, and they've said this film is the worst nightmare for what they could imagine could happen to their child.
um, well, hopefully they still enjoy the movie. The short film does not involve Oliver as a character. The short film is it's a 5-minute piece, sort of this experience in tension and just trying to do something that felt suspenseful about a guy, a parking lot attendant, who comes across the iPad and this. Oh, my Siri's talking. That's actually somehow, maybe it's Larry doing that. Sorry. So the short film is about a guy in a parking lot who comes across the tablet and the story about Larry the monster, and it's about like his first encounter with the monster. And I was really inspired by sort of the theme of like human connection and sort of connection between technology and person to person, that I took that sort of central thematic idea and the character of Larry, and I brought that to the feature. So, when transitioning from short to feature, I really wanted to find a central character that I thought kind of would relate to this story, that would feel the most sort of at odds with technology that's turning on them. And that's where the character of Oliver came from. And my wife works with autistic children, and so I've gotten to know a lot of amazing kids with autism over the years and their families, and so I've long wanted to have a character like that in a big budget Hollywood movie, and this was my opportunity to sort of combine the two, and it worked thematically so well.
How difficult was it to flesh out that idea of having a demonic being in technology? Because I know when Josh Whedon did it in an episode of Buffy, he said it was one of the hardest episodes that they ever had to work on plot-wise. Was it fairly hard for you to actually flesh out that storyline?
That's an interesting fact. I didn't know that he said that. It's difficult to make technology scary, and so I quickly decided that I was going to try my best to not make it that we're afraid of screens, because screens generally feel pretty innocuous, right? We have them around us all the time. What I wanted to do was sort of change your mind about what a screen can be and sort of make you realize it can be this window to the true terror, which is the monster, the creature on the other side. And I was treating it more like an old book that you open up and, you dust off the pages and it brings a monster to life, or the old amulet, or like the VHS tape in The Ring, or the TV in Poltergeist, right? Like these sort of different devices that give way to the true horror, which in our case is the lonely, misunderstood monster named Larry.
So when you were kind of working out Larry as a monster, as the horror feature for this film, did you go back to any ancient mythology or anything like that to get some ideas, or was it just purely something that you came up with on the spot of how to create this being inside technology?
I'm certainly inspired by other horror characters. One in particular was Frankenstein, in the way that Frankenstein's monster, that, he was a character, a creature that people are afraid of on screen, or the townspeople in the movie are afraid of. But ultimately, the monster wasn't trying to kill people. The monster was just trying to find their own way in the world, trying to understand who they are, how they were made. It was that sort of sympathetic monster that I had empathy for that inspired me most. And so when creating Larry, I wanted to create someone that was sort of a manifestation of our loneliness, that comes from our lack of connection at times. And yes, sometimes that's through technology, but sometimes it's through other means, so we don't communicate with each other fully. And so it's like this loneliness monster who really just wants a friend, and that's something I could relate to, just as a human being. It made the monster more interesting to me, because he wasn't just like trying to kill people. He really had something we could all understand.
You mentioned before about being able to observe autistic children because your wife works with autistic children, but one of the things I found really, really interesting with this film was how natural you also had that relationship and the fears of the mother, played by Gillian Jacobs. Tell us a little bit about how you did research into that. Did you talk to parents of autistic children and discuss what their worst nightmares were, or what the difficulties are of being a parent to an autistic child?
Absolutely, yeah. So I did a ton of research. So my wife was a jumping off point, but then I, have a dozen or more people that I interfaced with to, both kids on the spectrum, mostly sort of, I tried to find kids that were sort of like Oliver, or adults who were like Oliver. Like there's this one guy, Sam Rubin, who's an amazing young man, autistic guy who, when he was young, like Oliver, he used to be nonverbal. He since has sort of become verbal and is now quite eloquent. But he would read drafts of the script and give me notes and feedback, and I kept just trying to be as authentic as possible. And same thing where yes, of course, I talked with lots of parents of kids on the spectrum, as well as speech therapists and other people who work with autistic children, and just tried to sort of build a character and a family that felt authentic, but also warm and loving. And I think ultimately what I discovered through the process is that, of course there are challenges having a kid with autism, but there are challenges having any kid of any kind, and the challenges may be slightly different, but ultimately it's about a family coming together who really love each other and find connection through the course of the story that maybe they were lacking at the beginning.
I love that aspect that you put in there as well about a favorite parent, saying that Oliver reacts differently to his father than he does his mother. Was that something that you found when you spoke to a lot of parents?
Yeah, actually, it was. I mean, again, that's like not just something to do with kids with autism. I mean, that's a familiar theme in parent-child relationships everywhere, including my own. But I do think, like, when parents are involved in their kids' lives in different ways, sometimes the kids can become more accustomed to one, or grow to feel more comfortable around one than the other, or see one as more the fun parent and one is more like the parent that makes them do work and stuff, which I think is a very common and understandable thing for both parents and kids. So yeah, I just you have a movie that's supernatural, that's dealing with all these other weird things going on, and like an iPad that comes to life, and a monster that comes to the screen, all this stuff. So for me, it was about creating characters at the center that were just as authentic as possible, and felt like relationships and parents and kids that we've all seen, that we can just love them as characters and understand them, and then go with them on the journey.
How important also was the casting for Oliver? Like, we know that as he's a great actor. We saw that in Marriage Story. When did he first come onto your radar, and when did you decide that he was perfect to play Oliver?
Yeah, Edgy is truly amazing, and it actually came from Steven Spielberg. Because I made this at Amblin, Steven shared with me a videotape of Edgy, like an audition that he had done for one of Steven's movies. The movie ended up not happening, but Steven was so enamored by this young boy's performance that he shared it with me and said, like, you should really consider him as Oliver. And sure enough, the video audition was incredible. I still saw hundreds of kids. Really wanted to see everybody that I could, because it was such a challenging role. But he kept coming back to Edgy. Every time I auditioned with him, he was just so in it. He was so special and so in tune with his emotions and in touch with his imagination, and it was very clear that like he was the only person to play this role, and I'm so happy we cast him, because he really stepped up to the challenge.
Definitely. You mentioned that it was a challenging role, and it certainly was. His performance was absolutely outstanding. What was that like, having to work with him and coach him in that role? Because like you said, that is a challenging performance for an older actor, let alone a child actor.
Yeah, I I mean, I was a child actor. I'm a recovering child actor from when I was like 7 till 14 or so. So I was lucky to have a fair amount of experience as an actor, as a kid, working with different kinds of directors and different kinds of material. And I definitely knew like what I liked and what I didn't like as a kid. And for me, so much about this is creating an environment that is like inviting and fun. I never wanted it to feel like work for him or any of the kids. I wanted it to feel like a fun, time, playtime basically to come together and make something exciting and create an environment where he's comfortable using his imagination or interfacing with Larry the monster, this giant puppet, and he can act scared, but we're not actually terrifying him, right? So it's really about creating just a really fun, inviting place where he can open his imagination and be comfortable opening his emotions, whenever sort of the scene called for it. And he really, he was incredible and just such a wise young actor, so experienced for his young age. And honestly, just the adult characters, Gillian, John, were just as impressed as I was, working with this young actor.
And Gillian is great in this as well, and of course most Aussies would know her for her role in Community as a comedy actress. What was that like working with her, but getting her to actually do a role that is really, really suspenseful and we see a more dramatic side to her acting?
Yeah, I always love, being able to take actors who are more known for comedy and showing their other sides. She's certainly done other drama work before. She's a classically trained actress. And just, when I met with her the first time, she just really responded to this character, really connected with the movie, and also, was excited to sort of work together on creating something really suspenseful. So I saw her not just as an actress starring in a movie, but as a creative ally. And she's also has filmmaking aspirations herself, and it was just, she was wonderful and super fun to have around. She loved doing the, sort of complicated one-er shots I would set up and really being in the suspense for a long period of time. So it was awesome. I can't wait to work with her again.
Awesome. Well, Jacob, our 15 minutes are nearly up, so I'd love to end the interview by asking you, what would you like to say to Australians out there before they go and check out Come Play?
Well, first I would say, thank you for checking out Come Play. I hope they're in the mood for something scary. It is a horror movie on its face, but ultimately it's a movie that has a lot of heart, that I hope you connect with the characters and sort of feel connection to a young character in Oliver that maybe is someone we haven't seen before, and sort of go on this journey with them.
Awesome. Well, Jacob, thank you so much for taking the time to come on our show today. And I want to say again, congratulations on such a brilliant and original horror film.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate the kind words.